All right, what is up, Mr. Bioneer? This is Michael Walsh. I'm the guy you've been debating with in the comment sections about the bench press. I saw you made a kind of, at least an indirect response video to me, so I thought the time had finally come for me to make my own video. I think we can discuss this stuff a lot better, at least through video, rather than typing in the comment section. I think stuff gets lost in translation there a little bit. But before I started, I wanted to show you where I train and how I train. This is my garage. As you can see, we got the squat rack, we got barbells, we got plates, we got some heavy chains, we've got the dip bar, we've got the weight belt for hanging weight. We do your dips and chin-ups and stuff. We got some machines, got glute ham raise machine, got a Roman chair, some nunchucks, got the back extension machine, got the chest supported row machine, got the weight sled, got a homemade Prowler sled. Gotta grab the duct tape, otherwise I get the tetanus. We got a big barrel of sticks. Got some Kali sticks, got a Shanai here, baseball bats, stuff like that. Got a trap bar, got a ton of heavy dumbbells. Goes all the way up to 120, as you can see. Got some for your cardio. We got the Aerodyne bike. I got my jiu-jitsu bag laying here. I told you I did jiu-jitsu. Bear in mind, this is Japanese jiu-jitsu. This is old school, full contact Japanese jiu-jitsu. Okay, it's stuff Michael Bisping did before he did MMA. I know this stuff's more popular in Europe than it is here in the States, but I just wanted to clarify that. Got the jiu-jitsu mat for when my jiu-jitsu buddies want to come over and get some work in. But on top of that, I wanted to show you that it wasn't a bunch of humbug when I told you I've done different functional modalities for my training. I've experimented with those. I've dipped my toes in those waters. So I wanted to show you, I've got the mace, the big mace. I've got, more importantly, a ton of kettlebells. Got all those. Got that big one over there. Got another big one over there if you can see it. I've got some Indian clubs right there. Over here, I've got, see right there, we got a big medicine ball. I got my boxing shoes in there. It's raining over here in Minnesota right now, so I'm not going to go outside, but outside I have two homemade Atlas stones and a big tractor tire. Flip the tire, hit it with a sledgehammer, stuff like that. So I just wanted to show you this quick, give you a little context. I'm going to probably splice in some deadlifting footage I took yesterday, and then do some FaceTime, get into the meat of the debate here. Form got a little bad on that last one, but that's okay. Frickin' Lost Boys soundtrack. Just trying to show I ain't all talk here, This is 500 pounds. 500 solid ass pounds. Yeah, buddy. Hello. So I don't have a script. I'm going off notes, so bear with me. I'll try to be concise and kind of stay on topic, but we do have a lot to cover. I'm going to try to stick to what you covered in your video. I'm going to try not to dig too deep into the weeds with the debate we had in the comment section. But starting with, we've got this whole idea of like how much force you can generate when pushing something while you're standing. And in the comment section, I did say to you that I thought we were kind of getting lost in the weeds on that, but you did cover it a good bit in the video, so I'm going to address it here. The first thing we got to talk about is that there's several ways to push something while you're standing. Some are better than others. The worst way to do it is to stand with your feet square and just push something straight in front of you when your posture is upright, that's a great way to push yourself backwards rather than pushing the thing away from you. So it's a good way to like make that happen instead of making that happen. And yeah, if you push something really heavy like that, it's not going to work. But let's just look at a progression of ways that you could push something while on your feet. Instead of that, you could stand in a staggered stance with one leg forward and one leg back, then push. You could stand in a staggered stance, drop your base a bit, lean forward a bit, and then push. You could do all of that, but also add a little bit of leg drive off that back leg without taking a step, but just a little bit of drive, boom, push. You could start in a neutral stance and then step forward and kind of drop into that pressing position. Or you could take several steps and even run at something and then plant yourself, boom, and push. And that final thing would be, you know, more what you might see on like an American football field. I'll try to distinguish between American football and association football as it may or may not come up. But that's like the kind of pushing you're doing there. And when you push that way, you absolutely can push something that weighs more than you. You know, I feel like you might object to that. You might say that, but in all of those cases, it's the leg drive and the momentum and things like that that's actually creating the force. It's not the pressing strength. But I would say it's both. It's the pressing strength in combination with all of those other things that's doing the work. And I would compare it to a push press. When you know, an overhead push press. There, you're also using your legs to create force to help you lift more weight. And that's why you can push press more than you can strict press. But it would be foolish to look at someone with like a 350-pound push press and say, oh, he's only doing that because of his legs. It doesn't take pressing force, pressing strength to do that. That's obviously absurd. And I think it's also analogous to a punch. So like when you punch, yeah, there's hip rotation, there's shoulder rotation, but there's also that snap at the end of the punch. And all of those variables are working together to give the punch a lot of power. And it's the same with running up to someone, planting, and boom, and pushing them. And like another example that is like a real world application of it or a training application would be the Prowler Sled. You know, I got a Prowler Sled over there. I've seen people load Prowler Sleds up with 800, 1,000 pounds and push them. And, you know, it goes without saying that sled weighs more than they do. And you might say again, like, oh, that's their legs doing the work because they're holding and they're pushing with their legs, they're not pressing it. And I would say a couple things to that. One, and I discussed this a bit in the comment debate, but there's a relationship between how much weight you can bench and how much weight you can push on a Prowler Sled. Because think about a Supramax hold, where you load up the bar with more weight than you can bench, and you just unrack it and hold it for 10 seconds or something, and then re-rack it. It's a really good type of training. I'm really fond of it. But if someone can only bench press 200 pounds, they can't do a hold with 600 pounds. Their arms will just give out and it'll fall on them. Similarly, someone that can only bench press 200 pounds can't hold at the bottom position 600 pounds because, again, they just won't be able to withstand it. You know, and that's an extreme contrast, but it makes the point. So if someone who can only bench press 200 pounds tries to push an 800-pound, 1,000-pound Prowler Sled, it's just not going to work because their arms, their chest, their shoulders, their upper body will be too weak. It won't be able to withstand and then transfer the force needed to push that sled. And in addition to that, like, people do they do press the sled. That's like a good kind of like GPP you can do with the sled. But like, look at videos of like that Caracos Grizzly guy. Like, he just made one with Juju Mafu. You know, he's doing like pressing with the sled with over 1,000 pounds. And yeah, he's putting his momentum into it. He's stepping in with his body and going boom, like that. Boom, boom. And doing a combination of like stepping, pushing off his planted foot, and then at the end pressing with his upper body to move that sled. But like with the push press, it would be silly to pretend the pressing strength isn't playing a role in that whole sequence. So now I want to talk about the idea of like whether or not you can push a person who weighs more than you. You absolutely can. And one thing to think about is that there's kind of like two situations where you're pushing someone. One is when they don't know it's coming and aren't ready for it, and one is when they do when they are. So if they're not ready to get pushed, that would be a situation like someone gets in your face, they're like chest to chest with you, and you say, all right, I'm tired of this guy's shit, and boom, you push them. Now in that situation, it's really easy to push someone who weighs more than you, because if you look at it, like if this is them, you're pushing above their center of gravity, okay? So you're gonna push them, they're gonna start tipping back, and then like have to catch themselves to keep from falling over. That's really easy to do. You can do that to big people. But you can also push people who weigh more than you when they are ready, and that would be like in a grappling contest, a wrestling match, or just a fight. A fight breaks out and you guys tie up and now you're wrestling. And on that front, I speak from experience. You know, I put my time in. I've grappled for many, many years. I've trained consistently, and I probably trained at like 9 grappling gyms over the last 15 years in different capacities. I've probably grappled with, at this point, thousands of people, either in competition or on the training mat. Like, I know the role that strength plays, but I'll still give you some specific examples. I've grappled with people who were bigger than me, as in they were taller, they had a bigger frame, but they weren't as strong as me. They were kind of strong because they just had the strength a big person naturally carries, but they didn't lift weights like I do. And when I grapple with people like that, I manhandle them, and they can't do the same to me. And that's without technique. You know, technique plays a role, obviously, but sometimes you just want to be a bully and just shove people around. And I'm able to do that to people that are bigger than me. I've rolled with obese people who outweigh me by 100 pounds, and same thing. I can shove them around in a way that they can't like shove me around. In the other direction, I've grappled with people who were smaller than me, but who gave me a hard time because of their strength. So we've got a guy at the gym right now who's a guy named Aaron. He was lifting weights. He didn't really know what he was doing. He doesn't have like a training background, really a good one. He was just doing like knee extension machines and kind of typical gym bro crap like that. And I told him, I was like, hey, why don't you focus on the compound barbell lifts and really put your energy into that? And he has, and since then, he told me like a month ago that he benched 280 for the first time, which for him is over 1.5 times body weight. And surprise, surprise, he's become one of the strongest people at the school. And he's smaller than me, he's weaker than me, but he's tough to just bully around because of his strength. He's tougher than bigger people. And additionally, I grappled with a guy years ago, a fellow named Paul Bradley, who at the time was like a top 50, top 100 MMA fighter, welterweight. I was a middleweight, so I was bigger. We met in a grappling match. He schooled me. And yeah, he was better than me, but he was also way stronger. If you look up photos of the guy or video, I mean, like he fought Luke Rockhold in Strikeforce back in the day. He is built like a fire hydrant. Like he looks as strong as he is. And yeah, it didn't matter that I had 15 pounds on him. So those are real examples. And I want to build on that and talk about the role of pressing strength in grappling and in martial arts, because you talked about that initially in your first video about the bicep curl and the role of biceps in wrestling. I'll just give you examples. Like you use your pressing strength a ton in grappling. Like use it to escape pins. So if you're stuck in the bottom of mount, you'll commonly bridge up at an angle or like straight up. You'll bridge up and you'll press the person off you. There's all kinds of scenarios where you'll try to escape side control. And in that situation, the little person's laying across you, their head's on this side of your body, you want it on this side. I'll put my palm like right under their face, and I'll pivot as I press to get their head to go to that side of my body. I'll be stuck in side control, and I'll have to frame in like this. And I'm not pushing, but I am using my triceps, I am using the shoulder, the chest, the lats a bit to try to frame in to make some space under their neck in the same position. You'll do the same kind of thing standing, like in a Muay Thai clinch kind of scenario. You're framing on their neck to make space to hook them down to knee them or whatever. Anytime you bear hug someone, you're squeezing with your chest. And to escape bear hug, someone has double underhooks under your arms from the front. You're going to frame on their chin. You know, you're gonna frame under their neck, again, with the edge of the arm or with the palms, one hand or both hands. You're gonna frame on them and press them away to get away. So you use it a lot. You know, I'm not necessarily saying use it more than your pulling muscles, but you use it a lot. And you use it a lot in, that's more of like a MMA wrestling kind of context, but in a true combative self-defense context, you use it a lot too. My dad was worked in security his whole life. He was a certified Tony Blauer spear instructor. Tony Blauer is one of the top names in the combatives industry. Look up the Tony Blauer spear system and you'll see it's all about the extensor muscles. It's all about framing. You know, so your pressing strength is going to help with that. And funnily, like I mentioned this whole debate with my dad, and we were talking about the idea of pushing people, and he told me the story about a time when he was doing door security at some place many years ago, and he worked with a fella named Tony, and Tony was only like 5'6", he was like 200 pounds, but he was like an ex-hockey player. He had a big, you know, well over 300-pound bench press, and some guy was making trouble, and Tony stepped in, boom, pushed the guy. And this freaking guy, like, got knocked off his feet. Like, he went like horizontal, like Brad Pitt in Snatch when he gets hit and you know, in slow motion, and they show him fly through the air like that. So this guy, boom, gets pushed, lands on the ground. The guy was okay, he got up, but surprise, surprise, he didn't make any trouble after that, because when you've been manhandled by someone with that big of a strength advantage over you, it's eye-opening. And it's humbling, and it makes you realize, like, oh crap, I probably should let this be. And that's real world. That's a real world application. That's functional. You know, hopefully we're not hooligans. We're not getting into trouble all the time. We're not going out looking for fights or something like that, especially as mature men. But, like, you know, this is still a thing that happens. You know, it's going to happen to most people. You're going to be in situations like that at some point in your life. Like, you ever go to a mosh pit? You know, all kinds of trouble. But moving on, sorry, there's some fireworks going off. We just had the 4th of July here in the U.S., Independence Day. But I wanted to talk about the role of the bench press in building power, because you talked a bit in our debate and in the video about the necessity of speed work and the advantage of things like plyometric push-ups and stuff like that. And in our debate, we talked about an example of, we had on one hand someone who just does push-ups, plyo push-ups, you know, maybe one-arm push-ups, whatever, but push-ups and plyo push-ups, and someone who can bench press 400 pounds. And we were comparing them, like who can throw a medicine ball harder, who can push you harder. And the answer to me is very obviously the 400-pound bench presser, but I'm going to explain more why I think that's obviously true. And I would just ask you, how much do you think someone who just how much do you think someone who just does push-ups and plyo push-ups, how much do you think they can bench press? You know, it's almost certainly less than 300 pounds, right? Because no one can bench 300 pounds without training the bench unless they're a prodigy, unless they're destined to be an elite strongman. And I get this is a little unfair because of the said principle, and there's a skill component to strength, but nevertheless, like, you know, even if you gave them a month to practice, like, how much is that to work on it, to do the bench press and learn the technique? How much is that push-up guy going to bench press? It's going to be less than 300 pounds. So what happens if that guy is given 100 kilograms? You know, you said 100 kilograms for you, like a set of 10, that's a good set for you. Like, what happens if you give that push-up guy 100 kilograms? He might get it up, like, you know, he might not even be strong enough to do that, but let's assume he's strong enough to lift it. He's going to lift it slowly because it's a very heavy weight for him. It's approaching his max. What happens if you give that 400-pound bench presser 100 kilograms? Even if that 400-pound bench presser never does speed bench, never does dynamic work, that bar is still just going to fly off their chest. They're just going to go, boom, and it's going to go up because it's an easy warm-up weight for them. It doesn't matter whether they do speed stuff. Because you mentioned the speed press, the speed bench in your video. And, you know, we can talk about the merits of the speed bench as a training tool for powerlifters in like a West Side Barbell kind of fashion. We can talk about whether athletes should do it. But I thought it was kind of silly you brought that up as if that's like a challenge to the bench press. It is a type of bench pressing. If anything, it's like a challenge to plyo push-ups, because you could say, why do plyo push-ups? You can do speed bench. And I'm not even saying you shouldn't do plyo push-ups, but I thought it was kind of a little strange the way you were mentioning the speed bench in your video. But nevertheless, circling back, even if you don't do speed benching, if you have a 400-pound bench press, 100 kilos is going to go up easy. And definitionally, that makes the 400-pound bench presser more powerful than the plyo push-ups guy. Because when the plyo push-ups guy tries to bench press 100 kilos, it goes up, but it goes up slowly. When the 400-pound bench presser pushes it, it goes up, but it goes up quickly. Definitionally more power. It's the same weight, same distance, less time, you know? So that's just unavoidable. It's an unavoidable outcome of doing that kind of bench press. Excuse me 1 second, my computer went into sleep mode. This is my first YouTube video, man. You gotta cut me some slack here. Okay, so I wanted to move on to your demonstration of the cable press. Now, you talked about this. You talked about that you mix it with a fly and you want to get the stretch and everything. But, you know, I'm looking at you do it, and I'm like, no wonder you can't press that much. I mean, you're starting like this. You look at the start of the movement like Thor in Love and Thunder when he's like shackled by Zeus and he's trying to escape. Like, no wonder. Like, I think a better demonstration of what we're arguing about would be, again, pushing the Prowler, or maybe something like a jammer machine, I think it's called. It's the plate-loaded pressing machine where you load the plates, you step in, grab the handles, and boom, push it up. That's not a perfect example because the weight's not moving perfectly horizontally. It moves like horizontally and then at like an inclining arc like that. But it's still pretty close. And people load that up with many hundreds of pounds. They load it up with more weight than they weigh, and they're still able to step in and boom, push that thing. So again, like, you know, I kind of just don't care how limiting you find the cable press to be. No offense, but the cable press is the British food of exercises. Yeah, no offense. But moving on. Okay, so you talked about the competition setup for the bench press and like kind of speculated on how you think it takes the chest out of the equation and why it's stupid to train that way. Now, this made me think there's an Alexander Bromley video where he talked about Eugene Teo, the bodybuilder, who kind of said something similar. He doesn't like the competition setup for the bench because you can't move the scapula as well. You can't get as good as a contraction with the chest. He thought for bodybuilding, you shouldn't bench that way. You should bench with more of a flat back. There's an argument to be had there, especially for bodybuilding. And yeah, we've all seen the meme of the hyper-flexible, usually small, power lifter who has an insane arch and grabs the bar really wide and only goes down that far. Yeah, that's obviously stupid. That's not good for developing strength. It's not good for developing muscle. That's someone gaming the rule system. But most elite big benchers still move with a fine range of motion. Like, you know, look at Scott Mendelson. You know, he's like the king of competition setup, leg drive, all that. Like, he's still got a good range of motion when he presses, and that guy tore his pec doing like a 720-pound bench press. And, you know, his pec is able to withstand more force than yours or mine. Ours is going to tear before ours will tear before his did. And yet, his pec freaking ripped off his chest under that load. And that's because he is still using his chest. And it doesn't matter that you're kind of locking your shoulders back like that. I mean, I would compare that to deadlifting. Like, it would be foolish to say your lower and upper back don't work and don't get built by deadlifting, even though it's a mostly isometric movement for the back. Like, wouldn't that be silly? So it's the same with the bench in a competition setup. So I think that's a misguided attack as well. Let's see here. You talk a lot about the recovery demand of bench pressing. I don't think the recovery is that serious. Like, I think it's more than push-ups, no doubt. Like, I treat push-ups as like recovery work. Like, when I'm traveling abroad, like in, you know, Malta or Botswana or something like that, if I'm in a hotel, a hotel all week, I don't have access to a good gym. Yeah, I'll do like push-ups to failure, and even a set of push-ups to failure feels like recovery work. It doesn't feel like a hard bench workout. And that's true, but nevertheless, there's people that bench every day. There's people that do overhead press every day, squat every day. I mean, you can't deadlift every day, but like the bench is just not that crazy of a recovery demand. And the juice is worth the squeeze. I mean, and if it's not, then that just means strength isn't that important to you. And I think that's one of my issues with kind of how you've presented this, because I know in one sense you will say very openly that you care more about strength endurance, muscle endurance, than you do about absolute strength, and that's fine. But then you'll also present these substitutes to the bench press, you know, the cable press, the push-ups, and so on, as if they're going to build the same functional strength as the bench press, and that is just not true, man. Like, if you don't want to bench press, what you're telling me is strength is not that important to you. And that's okay if you're an endurance athlete, if you just care more about endurance, if you play a sport where endurance is, or other attributes are much more important than absolute strength. So if you're a tennis player, if you're an association football player, yeah, you probably don't need to bench press. Or if you do, you don't need to bench press much. You don't need to chase a 400-pound, even a 300-pound bench press. You know, you're just doing it to build a modest amount of strength so that you're strong enough to do your sport, so that you're stronger than a sedentary person. But just be honest about that and say, like, you know, that is the consequence. That's what you're being willing to accept by choosing to eschew the bench press. You know, because I don't make the rules, but you know, I know that you like other barbell movements more than the bench press. You like squats and deadlifts more, but even there, you don't like them that much, because when you make a top 10 most functional movements to build strength list, you'll leave out all the barbell lifts. And you know, I don't even want to get into that, but like, you know, I'll just say the barbell is the tool for building strength, you know, and I don't make the rules. It's in the Goldilocks zone. It's a free weight, so you have to stabilize it, but you can hold it with two hands instead of something in each hand. It's symmetrical, and it's small enough that you can make a proper grip around it. And because of that, when you do movements like deadlifts, squats, bench pressing, rows, whatever, you can develop insane amounts of strength and progress it almost endlessly. Even just going to dumbbells, which are also good, like if you're doing dumbbell bench pressing, already you get a little bit worse results, because just by making it one thing in both hands instead of one thing in each hand instead of one thing in both hands together, you're introducing that much more instability, and that puts some cap on how much strength you can build. You know, it's, you know, I don't make the rules. This is, you know, the barbell just sits in the right spot. It's in the Goldilocks zone. Doesn't mean it's the only tool you can use, but it's the main tool you should use for strength. And if you're saying you don't need to do barbell lifts of whatever kind, what you're kind of saying is that you just don't need to get that strong, and that strength isn't that important to you, which may or may not be appropriate, but let's just be honest that that's what we're saying. And kind of touching on that, like, part of our disagreement about it was also about, like, you know, you don't like the fact that compound lifts are always given such priority over like isolation lifts. And to me, that is similar to the idea of, like, you know, why I think the barbell lifts are better than most of the like kind of functional movement alternatives. It's that it's progressible. It is much more loadable. If you do isolation lifts, like, you plateau quickly, because you can use a barbell for endurance, for strength endurance. You can get to a point where you can do 50, 75, 100 reps on the bench press with 135 pounds. No one on earth can do 100 reps of barbell curls with 135 pounds. Just can't be done. So even on that front, like, the bench press can be used quite well. And you talk about relative strength a lot. Like, I'm not against gymnastics and calisthenics and things like that, but you know, someone who power lifts builds relative strength too. Like, I looked it up. The raw bench pressing world record at 165 pounds for men is 420 pounds. Like, that's relative strength. You know, that is a just galactically strong small person. You know, I'm not saying that Hannibal for King doesn't have high relative strength either, but, like, you know, it comes back to the same thing over and over again. If strength is the goal, the barbell is the tool. You know, there are other options, but the barbell is the main tool. And just like with the bench press, like, you can do other stuff. You can overhead press, you can do weighted dips, you can do dumbbell bench presses, and that's fine. But the king is the king, and I just don't see why you got so much hatred for the bench press man. And, you know, hatred's a strong word. I'm putting words in your mouth a little bit there, but I don't know why you got such an axe to grind with it, because, I mean, come on, like, you know, I think you said your PR in the bench press is like twice body weight. That's very good. Like, the bench press has been good to you, man. Like, I don't see why you gotta talk so much shit about it. Like, I feel like you should be a proponent of it. I'm just checking my notes here. Yeah. And like a last note I would make about like the strength thing, it's like, it makes me think of Jim Wler. He made the 5-3-1 program. I'm doing it right now. It's like one of my favorite powerlifting or like barbell strength training programs. Like that, his book that he wrote about it is just a really interesting book for training philosophy, because he's a bit of a hybrid athlete. He used to play American football, got into powerlifting. Now he's just like into being a freaking unit. And like he does barbell lifts, all the main lifts, and he does power cleaning and stuff like that too, in addition to the normal strength stuff. And he'll work in some cardio. Like he'll do the Prowler sleds. He'll do uphill sprints, stuff like that. And I heard once that he like was thinking about adding like long distance running into the program, but after doing the Prowler sleds and stuff, he went and ran a mile and he was able to do it in 7 minutes, and he wasn't dead by the end of it. So he was like, that's enough cardio for me. I don't need to do any more than that. Now someone else might look at that and say that's not nearly enough cardio. Novak Djokovic or someone like that, like the tennis player, he might look at that and be like, I need way more cardio than that, and I don't need to be able to bench press 350 pounds. So that person's workout program may be much more lopsided in favor of conditioning work, and their strength work might be that little bit added at the end, in much the way the cardio is a little bit added at the end for someone like Jim Wler. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that for someone with a YouTube channel, someone who just likes working out. There's nothing wrong with that if you play a sport that, you know, has those demands. But again, let's just be honest here. Like, if you're telling people that the bench press is overrated and you can do cable presses instead, and if you're telling people that, you know, animal crawls and stuff like that are more important for functional strength than barbell squats and barbell deadlifts and things like that, I have to insist that what you're really saying is just that strength is not very important, because those are the tools that best develop the most strength. The barbell tools, or the barbell as a tool, the barbell exercises. So I guess that's my gripe. You know, I mean, we've kind of covered a lot of things over the course of this now odyssey of interactions we've been having together. But, you know, I think that more or less sums up what I've been trying to get at. I'm nearing the half-hour mark on my video here, so I'm going to have to cut it. But I just want to say, man, all this bickering aside, I'm a very big fan of the channel. I've been subscribed for many years. You know, I've shown people your videos. You know, I think disagreements on training philosophy aside, I think you're an open-minded guy who has introduced people to a lot of cool ideas. And you're a very positive dude. You have a very positive, wholesome, healthy, both physically and psychologically message that you put out there for people. And I've seen that, you know, I've shown friends of mine some of your more kind of motivational videos, and they've been genuinely moved by them. And to me, that's worth something. That's worth a lot, actually. So, you know, this is all meant, you know, this is meant to be an olive branch, even though it's a debate. But so I hope you watch the video. I hope you like the video, and be fun to have some more exchanges down the road. Okay, peace out, man. Much love from Minnesota. Much love from the States.